Hi, good morning. This is one of the series of talks that I did for Osher USF Senior Learning Center on science and history of senses. We did several sessions. After the introduction to varieties of senses, and we talked about eyesight and touch, taste, and I think this is the last one that is left is hearing, and some of the other ones which we should address, but there is not enough time to talk about balance and and other things. I think I talked about it in the first session. Now, hearing, while very important, it has always taken a back seat to sight. Okay, and perhaps it has to do with the speed of light versus speed of sound. Okay, and the word absurd is, may surprise you, has roots in Arabic, being not able to hear. And surdus in Latin has means deaf or mute. So it's heart melodies are sweet. Heard melodies, sorry, not hard, but those that are unheard are sweeter. That said the famous poet Keats. Okay, and so this has to do, vision is fast, and literally in mammals and humans is the king of all senses. Okay, now, and interestingly, when we go through the animal kingdom, there are blind animals, but not deaf ones. So this is an interesting thought. Okay, so in other words, whether superiority of art or hearing is over life, and is imagination more powerful than senses? And people who have dementia, they respond to music, and music has altogether a different processing in the brain, that you can lose your thinking and ability to recognize your parents, or your own children, but people will respond to the sound of music and will join in. There is something about how the music is stored in the brain and recalled. Okay, and some of the sounds, obviously, we talked about, the memories of taste, and that was the idea for this class. But music has, always, remember that program, Name That Tune. All you have to do is to listen to one note, and you can recall the song that you heard several decades ago. And for example, in simple things, like marching, soldiers have always been associated with singing when they're on a long march of 18 to 20 miles in one day. And even simple such a thing like clinking of a glass or crunching of potato chips, brings in memories, and it makes you hungry or as the time goes by. Okay. And then, what are the first hard sound that you heard or sound that you heard? Hopefully, this will play. This, yeah, what? Yeah, no. I think I have to stop my headphones. I think now you should be able to play. So this is the first rhythm that most of us heard. Its pattern is described as unstressed short followed by a stressed longer one, or one can say the classical one that most medical students learn about, lubbed up to the stethoscope, and is one of the most fundamental and international, the so-called iambic meter. The iambic pentameter, that's the building block of all the sonnets, that repeats this pattern. up, up, up. So, and obviously the classic lines from the well-known or well-repeated sonnet, shall I compare thee to summer's day? Rogue winds do shake the darling buds of May. Okay, so that's, and the second one, the herb was about the baby's heartbeat, which is obviously a lot faster. And this is the abdominal ultrasound that a lot of pregnant women almost all the pregnant women go through. Okay, and so this is uh, and how the rhythm shapes the way we use and understand languages has a lot more bearing than we realize. So that was hopefully that was interesting. And okay, your first experience. But there were some more examples of it, okay. And this is what is known as echocardiogram. Now I wasn't going to show this, but I worked with this technology for 40 plus years, so I thought I would show this. It has nothing to do with hearing, but this is your heart with the recording device at the top where the letter V is, and then the beam of the ultrasound spreads out, and these are the 4 chambers of the heart. The tip of the heart is right here, the transducer, as we call it, and as the heart beats, and the blood flows through the heart, the varieties of 4 heart valves and 4 chambers. And the left heart is most important in the adults, obviously. Not that right heart is not important, but and you can see and this can be color coded based on the Doppler signal. Okay, based on the intensity of the. Now Doppler is the same example that you hear when the train is coming towards you, when the sound gets louder, when it's going away, it gets, or the police car or ambulance for that matter. So this, based on that, can be the signal intensity can be color coded, and that you might see the flow, when in red versus blue. Okay, the heart valve opening and closing. This is the side label. The recording is from the top, and this is the blood comes from the clean blood comes from one side and it goes out into the aorta. This is the aorta, and the valves open, not in one opens, the other closes. If I can play it slowly, you can just see when one opens, the other one closes. And this is called short axis view, where the heart is sliced like an egg around the shorter diameter. And then this is the so-called 4-chamber view. When the blood comes towards you, it is red. The recording point when it's going away into the aorta, that's blue. Okay, and then it's again, this is rotated at right angles, and you can see the blood, it comes into the vein chamber, out. I will play it slowly. When it is coming towards, fills the left ventricle, and then it goes out through the aorta, as you can see nicely. Okay, I'll try to play as slowly as possible. See, this is when valve opens, the blood is coming into the main chamber. At the same time, the rest of the blood is going out, as you can see, and when it can be determined based on and one can do some simple mathematical calculation based on velocity and geometry, so you can determine the severity of the abnormalities. And the valves can be abnormal due to rheumatic fever or just old age. Okay, and this is the music from the master. Due to copyrights, I'm not going to play this sound here, but obviously who amongst us does not recognize the man who was deaf but still created beautiful music, and okay, and this was the in the early days of recording, Edison's recording machine, that a terrier named Nipper, who belonged to a who was listening to the cylindrical phonograph or recorded his master's voice and made the doctor took interest in the recorded voice emanating from the home. And the idea of committing this to canvas, this took place in Liverpool, by the way. And that was the start of the famous gramophone company, or phonograph, as it was called in those days, HMV, and that was the biggest British conglomerate. Okay, and at least growing up in former British colony, this was a big music brand, and they had HMV radios and phonographs, that controlled a lot of business. Okay, and again, all Americans would recognize this, the groundbreaking award-winning movie based on the life of Helen Keller. Okay, and there is no, all talks on hearing has to have a nod to not just Helen Keller, but to her, patience, and an accomplished teacher, and Sullivan. Okay, and okay, and that was, she had lost it, due to scarlet fever or meningitis, and they were together for 49 years. And her quote was that deafness is worst misfortune. And again, she went on to become a celebrity and an advocate for disability worldwide. But at the same time, she was a eugenist, and while advocating rights for disabled people, was wanted to make, was in favor of pure, healthy breeding. Okay, and so, and then again, going back to the classical Greek philosopher, the Stoic philosopher, Epictetus, he says, God has given us 2 ears but one mouth, so we should hear more than we speak. So again, that was one of the philosophical dictums. And again, Thomas Edison had damage to his ears from scarlet fever. Okay, so this is well known. So moving on. Okay, this is an auditory illusion, not optical, sorry. Okay, and let's see how your brain processes this.
Laurel, 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 laurel.
Okay, so this was an auditory illusion. The audiograms are similar, and the brain is primed. The Yanni is higher frequency, and pitch down, Tani, pitch up, Laurel. So how we understand the speech pattern recognition has to do with your frequency and amplitude of the sound. And you get conflicting information on your brain, so it depends upon how the word is pronounced. So, okay, so when the test is given to a large audience, some people will hear it Yanni, some people will hear it as Laurel. Okay, so this is, was one of those, but there are optical illusions are very common, but this was one of the few ones that I was able to find for hearing.
Laurel.
Okay, and now this is, we may look down upon bacteria, but again, this may be of surprise or interest to some of you.
Like paramecium, swim rapidly using hundreds or even thousands of flagella, or cilia as they are usually called. They are very agile as they search amongst the pond debris for food. Beating of the cilia is coordinated, and the direction of beating is reversed when the cell changes the direction it wants to go. This cell, like the last ones, had to be slowed down in a sticky solution so that it could be photographed. Many protists also use their cilia to create currents for feeding, carrying nearby organisms close enough to be eaten. These algae are too big for this protist, but show the currents clearly. This large protistan cell called stentor feeds like a vacuum cleaner. A circular array of cilia around the flattened end of the cell sucks nearby organisms into a conical mouth where it can check out what it has captured. It is feeding here on green algae. Notice that it is quite selective about what it eats, swallowing some of the captured cells and rejecting others. Liquid or mucilage can be moved long distances over the surface of the tissue. Flagella and cilia contain a core of microtubules. Using polarized light for imaging the cells, the microtubules show up as a dark or light fiber inside each cilium.
Okay, so this is the mechanosensory neurons are present in jellyfish, and that evolved as far back as 500 million ago. And that took a long time before hair cells evolved. And we'll talk about hair cells, when we talk about mammals and humans. Okay, and the early vertebrates use vibration for fluid around the body and within their body. Early fish developed semicircular canals and otoliths and ancestors of shark, and the speed of the sound is 5 times faster in water. Okay, so that served as an early warning system, because under the ocean, the light is poor, and so relied on sound and vibrations a lot more. Okay, and that's again when you get to the lower levels in the oceans, some organisms produce light of their own. Okay, and so this is okay, so that's one way of and there are all sorts of variations. Some animals have been actually able to produce sounds from their anuses. Okay, and
like Paramecium swim rapidly using hundreds or even thousands.
Sorry, I think kind of clicking. Okay, and so it's a balance is important even in swimming animals. So there are varieties of evolutionary tricks that have taken over eons. Okay, now the varieties of intensities that are perceived, in different areas, so like you can just see the whisper is fairly low, and the sound is measured in decibel, but the intensity from whisper is around below 10. Okay, and then gradually gets children in playground. This is the sort of comfortable range. Okay, then beyond that, it becomes harmful and irritating. Obviously, pneumatic drill and the jet plane taking off, and that was one of the reasons why the Concorde airplane was manned and had only a limited areas where they could land. And now the hindbrain, or the posterior part, receives the raw and sensory motor signals from your auditory nerves, and then it's sent up further to the thalamus and midbrain area, which integrates all this information. And as we've talked about in the other classes on senses, the brain integrates a lot of this information via the thalamus, and finally it's sent up to the brain. And the human frequency range that can be appreciated is anywhere from 20 to 200,000 hertz. Okay, and so this is the frequency, the same as the pitch of the sound. Amplitude is the loudness. Okay, and the timbre is the quality of the sound. So the sound has different properties, physical properties, by which we try to put a number and quantify it. Okay, and we have across the animal kingdom, there's a huge dynamic range, from mouse to elephants, type of thing. Okay, even though the size is dramatically different, the analogy of range from smallest, the quiet sound is one mouse. Okay, and then anywhere up to elephants, which is sensitive ear. So this is similar to, okay, And again, now in the universe is not, we have now discovered the gravitational sound waves from the black holes. Okay, and a lot of this information that comes around is processed in our cochlea, which contains specialized hair cells. Okay, and and obviously, we all know the sensitivity of elephants' ears. We'll talk more about it when we talk in the class, in the next class that starts next week on sensing in animals. Okay, but I'm just giving you a preview of it at this stage. Okay, and now this is the basic anatomy of the ear, the outer ear, the middle ear, and the inner ear. Okay, the inner ear contains the cochlea and the neural spiral shaped organs. Okay, and start to make sense. Now the so-called pinna of the ear is the sound gathering device, and basically it is sent down to a trumpet, which is the tympanic membrane that increases the sound. Now again, the notch in your ear, that is evolved for a purpose. It helps localize the high frequency sound. The inner ear is a fluid-filled chambers. It to different ionic concentration. So it creates what we call as electrochemical gradient. In this gradient allows the this particular gradient allows the ions to flow inside the sensory cells, which I will show it, later on in a smaller microscopic photograph. Okay, and then that creates vibration into the basilar membrane of the ear. Okay, and then the ear creates sounds and vibrates the drum, and the bones transmit the ear to the cochlea, which is the shell, shelf state, organ. Okay, and it sends out impulses. The two fluid chambers are separated by a membrane along the elastic sheet. So that's like a waves upon the ocean. We hear the moving fleet, so it separates different frequency. Cochlea is extremely sensitive with a huge dynamic range. And a lot of this work was carried out by a Hungarian scientist named György von Beksy. Okay, he was in the early 20th century. Was a physiologist, and he was awarded a Nobel Prize for the discovery of the physical properties of sound. Okay, now let me just see what and he analyzed the sound and how it was communicated through the ear. So he worked out a lot of the basic science or physiology of the human ear. Okay, and this is the shell-shaped cochlea, which looks like a snail type. It's fluid with lymphatic type of fluid, and the membranes that move. Basically, so you can just see the inner ear. It's depicted in view. This is the cochlea, and the round window on which receives the message from the bone that it is attached to, and the membrane just moves exquisitely. And there are about 20,000 hair cells that are spread over 1.5 inch of area. Okay, and this can be a worry if there are disease pathology, and that's all that you get. They don't regenerate. Okay, some animals do, but now this is more, for example, how the basilar membrane responds to high frequency sound. You can just see the medium frequency and the low frequency that is below 600 hertz. Okay, and 20,000 hertz, so it's just coming in very faster. So, so you can see how the cochlea is round shape, and at different level, different frequencies are interpreted. Okay, so that's that's how the mechanism works, and this is like the evolutionary trick that we have inherited. Okay, now I think this video I may have to show only part of it, not in order to not to get the copyright. But this is the World Science Festival, is a very knowledgeable site for science discussion. It is monitored by Brian.
Frequency, and the space between the two peaks here is called the wavelength, and the whole thing propagates along roughly at the speed that the molecules themselves are moving. So the speed of sound is typically the speed with which molecules move. And that's sort of what a pressure wave is. It needn't be the air, it could be water, it could be solids, and so on. And I think it's the big green button, we'll see. Yes, it is, that's good. So there are sort of three aspects to sound. It's worth us just sorting and separating out. So the first would be pitch, and pitch is determined by that frequency. And here sort of is a piano keyboard from the bottom of the piano to the top. And over here are those numbers of waves hitting your ear per second. 30 hertz is the name given to this. 100, 1,000, 3,000. It's a bit of a scrunched scale. And the human range, what your ear responds to, is from a little bit below the bottom of the keyboard, 20 hertz, up to about 20,000 or 20 kilohertz. Here, of course, is the musical staff correctly placed against the notes. And here are two, just to give you that idea. Let's, Tom, if we can just play the top one of the...
Okay, I think I don't want to violate the copyright, so I will just skip over this.
Frequency and the space between. Frequency is related to pitch. What about volume, loudness? This is a quick sort of graph of a pressure wave here, high pressure, low pressure, high pressure, low pressure. So the loudness is defined by basically how much pressure variation there is compared to the average pressure, but in math terms it's delta P over P. The thing that's really interesting about this is that our ears are amazingly sensitive. So for example, if that range in pressure is 1,000th, not a lot, that's essentially deafening. And on the decibel scale, 135 decibels, that's a jet engine, you're close to the engines. A millionth of a difference in pressure is pretty noisy. That's a party sitting in a party in a crowded bar. And then our ears, very quiet, 15 decibels is a billionth. So I think, as we'll be hearing from Christopher, it's very interesting that the ear is able to amplify such tiny, tiny pressure variations.
Okay, so I think this is, for those of you, I'll send out a link. It's just easy to find World Science Festival, and the scientist here in question explains the pitch, loudness, and timbre. Okay, so this is okay, and we'll just go through that, scan through that. Okay, so
happened there. Let me go back. There we go. So you'll notice that we have two spectra for a clarinet and a flute. So here we have pitch along the bottom. Here's the whole range for a piano, and it goes above that clarinet. So now the top one.
Okay, now the cochlea, as we mentioned earlier, contains hair cells, which are specialized hair cells, and the upper chamber and lower, which are the elastic, sheet type of thing. Hair cells have cilia, and the sheet vibrates and the cilia move. Okay, and the ions are driven by the electron change in the voltage. These are called mechanically gated potassium channel that leads to influx of calcium, and the cells move in sync with the boosting wave. Some of the waves are reflected back like a distant mic. Ear generates its own sound. Okay, so this was, the link that I had put was Good Vibrations from the Science Festival. So there are three chambers, which are called scala vestibuli, tympani, scala media, where the hearing takes place. And so this is, so the brain is like a frequency analyzer, and okay, and the outer hair cells, the frequency is based on amplifier. And it's like it works more or less like a piano. Right? So it's an exquisitely tuned mechanism that takes place. Okay, and these are the electron microscopic picture of the hair cells. You can see how the normal and the loud noise damage. This is permanent damage. Hair loss that has taken place. Okay, and this is all that you had. This is important for all of us. Okay, the outer hair cells and inner cell tectoral membrane and the basal membrane, and that help you amplify the sound, and in a way that is a lot more complicated than that your eye, which is and the energy moves back and forth, and they have nerve endings that transmit to the brain. There are various rows of the cells, as you can see how they are clearly lined, and so this is, and this, so the cells are almost like your mohawk hairstyle, okay, and this can be damaged, with for a variety of causes, the commonest one being, just aging process, but some of the chemicals which we use for treatment, one antibiotics is called gentamicin, was notorious for causing hair loss, and again going to loud rock concerts or even just wearing your headphones very loud can cause permanent hair loss. And as I mentioned many times, once it's lost, it's lost. Okay, the first thing you lose are the nerves that send sounds up to the brain. These are the inner hair cells, and there is a synapse in the auditory nerve. The noise exposure, the synapse is lost. As you can see how the connection is severed, and the nerve fibers then degenerate. Okay, so this is one of the basic mechanisms why hearing loss occurs. And your brain understands speech basically through pattern recognition. So different sounds have energy in different frequency band. Okay, and hearing is so important that the earlier untreated hearing loss increases your chance of getting dementia. And the initial sign, maybe they have trouble in meetings or in crowded places, or you cannot clearly decipher the words. Okay, and then and this is, and that's this can be detected with audiogram. Okay, and and this cannot be aggravated by just by the hearing aid fix, simply because just once you, so sometimes just the best alternative would be to preventive care in the first place, to look after your ears, to not tune up your sound really loud, or avoid loud, and obviously a lot of times it can be occupation related as well. And again, and this is after a blast that shows the red dots are the nerve cells, and hearing aid can fix the audibility problem, but not the transmission problems. Okay, so they have problem with signal to noise ratio and difficulty in speech. We think there is one reason why people have trouble understanding speech in noisy. Okay, all right. Okay, speech. Okay, and now this is again has to do with the hearing, and speech is so much important, and they are so interconnected. That evolution compromised by the position of the voice box or larynx. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why, and there is like a little flap over it, so that's one of the reasons why choking occurs. And other animals can breathe while eating, while humans have difficulty. Okay, and this has to do with the position of the larynx descended, with and being close to your food pipe, and that causes the food to go into the wrong direction, and choking sensation. Okay, and that is the evolutionary trade-off one can see. Okay, that and that the risk of sudden death was acceptable to evolution, because of the benefit that was derived from social communication with speech. And I think this is about the animals as to hear, but I'll talk about it more, when we talk about animals. I think this is
with a vibrating source that causes waves to travel through the air like ripples on water. The waves create a pattern in the surrounding air molecules. At the front of the wave, the molecules are pushed together. Towards the back, they are pulled apart. These wave patterns move outward from the source, with stronger waves sounding louder than weaker ones. A sound's frequency, or Hertz value, is the number of waves that pass a given point in 1 second. The more waves per second, the higher pitch the sound. Some creatures can hear pitches so high or low that they are out of the range of human hearing. The best listeners can not only detect a wide range of frequencies, but can quickly locate their source. This barn owl has asymmetrical ears. One is set slightly higher on its head than the other. This helps it pinpoint the source of a sound in three-dimensional space. In an instant, its brain creates an auditory map, homing in on the location of the sound. Then the owl can make an accurate strike, even in total darkness. And we humans have our own amazing tricks. We can somehow sort through a symphony of competing sounds, and in an instant recognize the vital ones. Filtering this auditory jungle to pick out what we want to hear is one more way hearing helps us to interpret our world. With a vibrating.
Okay, so you get the idea, and then we'll talk again more about it. And the fish in the swim bladder, sharks have a limited hearing. Goldfish has excellent hearing, and they can discover frequencies that are beyond our range. Okay, so I mean, obviously, we all know how dogs and elephants have a totally different, ability. Okay, and okay, so and we'll talk a lot more when we talk about animal senses. And the whale songs has become a cultural phenomenon. Okay, when they recorded the whale sounds, and the album went on to become a bestseller. Okay, then back in the 70s, when the scientists were able to record the sounds that travel thousands of miles looking for mates and rivals. Okay, and the water is a rather unique habitat, where the dissolved salty water is a different good conduction. Okay, and so that has a lot to do with varieties of vibrations are also carried much further. Okay, and there are varieties of frogs that have been around for 300 more years. And then they create varieties of sounds for finding mates and keeping their rivals away. So this is the model organism, okay, that has been used for studying the amphibian. Okay, now unlike humans, their stem cells are a lot more resilient, that they're able to regenerate their damaged hair cells, and so they have varieties of genetic abilities that we have lost basically. So this is a good organism to be studied. So, and sometimes they can rewire their brains in as early as 48 hours. Okay, and so we'll again talk more about it when we focus on the animal senses. Okay. And sometimes the pitch of the sound, like in that, and the frogs, again, the female frogs prefer the low frequency sounds, like a low pitch sounds, and that may encounter, that we may have preference for that, and that shows about the popularity of Neil Diamond and Barry White, that sound is considered more attractive to females. Okay, and we talked about night owls already, so. Okay, at length, that and your brain can detect, the differences of almost of a half a milliseconds, type of thing. Okay, but the owls have you beat by a long shot, so to speak. So. And we'll, again, we'll talk more about bats, but their ability for echolocation is just phenomenal. That that they can. And they create clicks of as many as 50,000 cycles per second. Okay, and then they're able to, the sound is reflected back, and even some crowded, dark, things, and they're able to analyze the image, the waves that are coming back in 3 dimensions. And obviously, remember that both the organism, the hunter and the prey, are both, both moving in 3 dimensions. So that in spite of that, they are able to create insects, and they need to eat large amount of insects, because they have a high metabolism. Okay? And some of the sounds are basically, very irritating to know, because we live in a noisy world, such as car alarms, jackhammers, and the worst has got to be, nails on the blackboard, and that's one of those, ways to torture. Okay. Some birds have developed a remarkable ability to mimic hum sounds. So here was this crow that speaks in a Yorkshire accent, you all right, love? So that was just how their abilities, it's like the water dance.
Here in the who appears to be alone, bellows his serenade d'amour and performs his magnificent water dance to attract us. His bellows above water are audible. Underwater, the throaty vibrations he gargles forth are too low for human ears to perceive.
And so this is, the crocodiles can create this sound as well. Okay, and that is used for water dance, so I think, again, I'll just go through this quickly. You can see how, it creates the vibrations over the water. Okay. The alligator sounds, okay. Then just for sake of time, I think I'm not going to record all of it, because I want to make sure that this video is not too long. Okay. And this evolutionary sounds has remained relatively stable from alligators to humans, basically. Okay. So. Okay, and there's varieties of ways evolution ear has been reconstructed in different animals. It can be from different parts of the bodies. As you can see, this huge number of insects. They've all evolved hearing in different parts of the body. Not just in antenna, but on wings, and so this is the evolutionary experimentation has a huge range. Okay, and I think these are some of the insect sounds. Okay. Okay, and this is a small, yellow and orange face insect, which inhabits a small island near Colombia. Okay, that connects to a tympanic membrane connected to a small plate. And the sound waves move the tympanis back and forth. That translates of the air pressure and produces this huge array of sounds. Okay, and that has evolved basically to avoid predators. Okay, and their range is from too high and for most organisms and potential predators, and it can go from anywhere up to 10 to 50 kilohertz. Okay, so that's a wide varieties in which they have learned to, protect themselves and survive, basically. And the snowy cricket, produces sounds by rubbing body parts or wings, and it is related to the temperature. When if it gets hotter, the number of chirps increase. Okay, and some of the other animal sounds, they can rub their penis against their abdomen and produce a very loud sound. Okay, so evolutionary surprise is huge. Okay, and now this is an interesting or more complicated video that
Now, what simpler sine waves need to be added together to produce this more complicated wave? Viewed this way, most sounds have multiple frequencies. These are 3 different musical instruments all playing the same note. Here's the flute, the penny whistle, and the banjo. So we can hear that those are the same note, but we can also hear that they are different instruments. We hear these as being the same note because they have the same fundamental frequency. That is, the low frequency large oscillations are the same in all 3 of these panels, but they differ in how many of these smaller high frequency components are present. Now we can graph this, and here's how we do it. So let's take our example of a complicated waveform as the sum of 2
Okay, I think so. What she's talking about, how the information is processed, on the left side, okay, while the emotional aspect is processed on the right side. So there is so-called compartmentalization of the sound frequency, okay, and this is like a overall overlapping curves, and your ears try to make sense out of it, And again, the classical axiom in neuroscience, the neurons that fire together wire together. So that is one of the ways how which you can pick out a familiar sound at a cocktail party, okay? And well, unlike vision, which is limited to the front and sides at the most, hearing is a 360-degree spectrum, and it's a little slower processing than that of ear. But again, the analysis as the brain does a complicated math to make sense out of the sounds that are coming in from different directions. And now the misophonia is the hatred of a certain sounds, so sometimes, some of the sounds, like we already gave you the example, that they would just, irritate the dickens out of you, like rubbing a chalk on, or, fingernails on a blackboard. And that's one way, and so a lot of humans have a certain sound that are just plainly they're unable to stand it. Okay, and we'll talk about the echolocation, that bats, dolphins, and whales have that, so bats are not actually blind, they're active listeners, and they create, sound from 3 dimension, and they're traveling at different speeds through the night, and in spite of that, they're able to do a perfect analysis and echolocation. Okay, and we'll talk more about it, in our next class. Okay, and it can detect a distance, type of thing, and movement, along with, basic advantages is that of Doppler shift. Okay, now this was, a gentleman named Ben Underwood, and his eyes were removed for surgery, and he's able to do echolocation by producing clicking sounds, and okay, and so he's been able to train his own body, and senses in such a way that he can, navigate, even though he's, visually impaired.
All right, well, for many blind...
And I think because of the copyright thing, I'm not going to show this, so he's almost like, one could say this is a modern day Batman. Okay, and then this was, this is an interesting, this is a woman who is blind and works as an astronomer.
The opportunity to look through a telescope. But it has given me tools to rediscover myself. I am an astrophysicist and a computer scientist. I study the universe through sound. The universe is big and I want to study it all. People ask, how do you do it? They're used to people just looking at the sky. But sound can make something clear when it is not just something clear to the human eye. Each piece of data is given a sound. That can be a piano, it can be an harp, or it can be a human.
Okay, and so she's, this was the famous telescope at Mericeba in Puerto Rico that was destroyed due to hurricane.
The way it behaves, the way it communicates. You can get a sense of the science, the opportunity to look.
Okay, and this is, the auditory cortex is the pink area that is near the ridge between the temporal and the parietal lobe, and this is the frontal lobe. Okay, and the blue is the Broca's area, which is for speech. Green is the Wernicke area, so they're responsible for generation and understanding of the speech. The right-sided people, process on the other side. So that's depends upon, that's, shows it shows the individual preferences to which side you hold your phone. So the music has interconnection between the frontal and the auditory area, and has, as an emotional response, so to speak. So, okay. And now this type of flow of tones, which is called prosody, intonation, stress, and rhythm, type of thing, and which we can just tell the difference. No dogs allowed to no dogs allowed. Okay, and so this is again for artificial intelligence. This may be harder to duplicate, type of thing. But again, that the newer AI, the so-called the newer models, they have developed enough sophistication that they're able to pass the Turing test. But that's another class in itself. So these are the auditory pathways. The cochlear nuclei are the first relay, and then there's something that goes to an area called the superior olivary nucleus. Okay. You can see this is the type 1 neuron that comes in the spinal cord. Then this relates to the superior olive. It's around here in the spinal cord region, and then it's transferred over to the what is known as the superior colliculus area in the midbrain portion, the mesocephalum, and then it goes to the thalamus, which is the area, and a third relay that occurs in brain. So why it wasn't just a single fiber, that may have more to do with evolution as to it is considered. The earlier animals have a very, they lack the frontal, the cortex type of thing. So that may have to do with that nature just used what it had and put it like a new addition on top of it. And that's why the later editions of encyclopedia are a lot bigger than the older ones. So that may be something to have an evolutionary basis to this. Okay. And this is, obviously, all of you are familiar with this word, the naming of the things, action by the vocal sound, imitation of the sound. Hearing and speech are such interconnected. The words that sound like what they mean. Okay, the common examples would be hiss, whisper, chirp, slither, babble, thump. Okay, so these are, and these are, again, the poets have widely used, like this. Lord Alfred Tennyson used this. The moan of the doves is in immemorial elves, and the murmuring of innumerable bees. Okay, so this has been widely used. And okay, and then again the location of the speech. We already emphasized the larynx descended in the neck, basically. So this has got to do with from mouth to the neck, and so that is an important evolution. We talked about how some animals can continue breathing while well, humans, we had a trade-off that we'd mentioned earlier. And without loudspeakers, we would have never conquered Germany. That was one of the statements from Adolf Hitler. So that the sound had, and his speech had a powerful, effect on convincing people about his ideology. Noise or sound, okay, and this was.
Why does Schoenberg sound like this? Many of you probably wondered the same thing. What is that?
And this was a real uproar when he so-called atonal music again,
Or chromatic, less reliant on things like major and minor scales and chords. Compare the.
And so this was, a music of, and now again, it's becoming, music is becoming more popular. It's generating a sort of a comeback.
What?
This is, Dame Evelyn Glenn. She was deaf from age 11, and, she's able to listen from other parts of the body. And again, not to violate copyrights, I'm not going to be able to show this, and she can feel vibration on the neck. And again, she has a nice TED talk, and she was a celebrity especially in the British in colonies. Okay, and she's able to listen basically from other areas, in spite of being deaf, and is able to perceive vibrations, and she can feel the music that she is through her feet basically, and she owns several thousand different varieties of instruments, and it shows as to how the human plasticity has evolved. Okay, and again, the music and science, there are varieties of it works as autistic but gifted musicians who have had Tourette syndrome. Okay, and then music has had a long tradition. There was a bony flute that was discovered 35,000 years ago in a cave in Slovenia. Okay, and then varieties of Mozart effect for various hearing deficiencies have been on reasoning. It has to do with your intelligence, and then daycare centers are now required to play classical music according to Florida law. So, and this again, music may help with epilepsy and Parkinson. So, and some people have so-called musical epilepsy, rather a rare phenomenon, but it does occur. Okay. Okay, and these are the varieties of sounds and music that is processed in different areas. Like how the musicians would and work in the different areas are activated. Okay, so and the adult non-musicians, you can see how their processing is a lot more sophisticated, than it takes place. Okay. So the brain is wired differently with a lot of practice. Okay, and again, this the hearing can be easily affected by viral illnesses such as congenital rubella or so-called German measles. Okay, and it also causes varieties of heart defect. Okay, and there was an epidemic of it in 1960s. There were as many as 10 million cases, and which led to 11,000 deafnesses and abortions, blindness. So it's the importance of vaccines cannot be understated. And that can again later on get not just called encephalitis, but it can cause mental retardation. And the famous deaf people, obviously, the list is 5, starting from Alexander Bell, Edison, and the actress who went and starred in the movie Children of the Lesser God, Helen Keller. We already talked about varieties of other actors and actresses. Even a football player had a problem with deafnesses. And then there was a movie starring Mr. Holland's Opus, that he created for his deaf son. Okay. And varieties of writers have had problems with deafnesses. This is, we've talked about, the list is pretty self-explanatory. Maupassant, okay, and Daniel Defoe, okay, and varieties of stories have incorporated this as well. Cochlear implants, we'll just talk a little bit briefly about.
A cochlear implant helps people with severe to profound sensory neural hearing loss or nerve deafness. A cochlear implant has two parts: an internal part called the cochlear implant and an external part called a speech processor. The speech processor uses two small microphones to pick up sounds. It turns those sounds into signals and sends them to a transmitter. The transmitter sends the signals through the skin to the internal implant. The internal implant converts the coded signals into electrical energy and sends them to the electrode array. This stimulates the nerve fibers in the cochlea, and the signals are recognized by the brain as sound.
Okay, so this was, first, marketed or tested in 1957. Okay, and later on, he's become more sophisticated, and then, but it's a very expensive procedure. But it has received criticism from deaf community. Okay, so, but again, that's a really revolutionary treatment for people who have had nerve loss, nerve conduction loss. So, and it's a dramatic recovery for people. Okay, and this is an example of a 20-year-old who heard for the first time, and obviously, they would say, it's a revolutionary change that takes place. And understand her emotions, they're incorporated. Okay, and I think this, I'm not going to be able to show this again due to a copyright violation hit that can occur. And so we have different neurocircuitry for music and language. So this is, okay, so associated limbic system associated with emotions that starts a human agency and a sense of social being. Okay, so other, because, and again, the Western music has a different ideas, and our emotion is heavily connected with it. For example, listen to Christmas songs, or your favorite music of your first date. Okay, and Muzak was widely prevalent, when in the 60s and 50s, 60s, when background music that was played in retail stores, but now that has fallen by the wayside with the availability of personalized space. So this is something called a phenomenon called pink zone. So energy is the same in each octave. So there's less noise as you go up. White noise has a higher frequency, so we perceive it louder, while brown noise is more like a low rumble and can make you almost sick to your stomach. So, okay. And sound and music are very intricately related. Soundtrack, that was. All of you recognize, and it's the bell system sound, so, and then again, the radio theater, which Orson Welles carried out, which had a dramatic effect, the varieties of action films, the sound, but obviously without the soundtrack, the movies would not sound that scary, type of thing. So the jingle has to be short and tempo type of thing. And it's really must create a type of emotional response to create an auditory processing. Okay. So the T-Mobile sounds, 3 gray sounds, 1 pink, so, and this is again helps us identify with the product that they're trying to sell. Okay.
A great example of using sound to have two different emotions, two different reactions by the audience to this creature. At first, we think it's cute. So we use these chirpy, high, very pure tone phrases. Very non-threatening, high-pitched, rising, cute. And then when it attacks.
Gary Rydstrom designed sound for the movies.
Okay, so this is I think he created sound for Jurassic Park.
So now we're hearing phlegm, and we're getting a great example.
Now, the sound can be used as torture. Now, I had a nice clip from the movie, but again, I can't show it to you, okay, because of copyrights. And, this was movie from the Clockwork Orange from the 1960s, where Alex, the trouble kid, was being tortured by Beethoven sounds. He associates that with, so this is and that was used in Abu Ghraib prison also when, okay, they broadcast loud sounds, and again, the Venezuelan dictators, when they were hiding out, the sound was used. I'm sorry, Panamanian dictator. Okay, and this is the hypersonic sounds, which is at the Mach sounds. It's a very fast speed, and all type of thing, and between two supersonic concourse.
Von Braun. Gather round while I sing you a Some have harsh words for this man of renown, but some think our attitude.
Okay, so he was he's making fun of von Braun, who was a German Nazi scientist who was working for the US. And so again, this is like the hypersonic aircraft is being tested type of thing. So that is warfare taken to another level, basically. And again, the militaries have used the sonars. So the oceans are a very noisy place, basically, because of oil drilling, ship noise, the military sonar. Okay, and you can see how that the undersound sources, just natural occurring sound. These are the, oil drilling, or ships, and the marine animals, and the constant ambient noise. So this, so you can just see how the range varies widely. So this was an example of it. Okay. And I think you can just focus on the individual areas, Okay, let's see if we can show that to you. And yeah, so you can see the frequency varies from oil rig to humpback whales to dolphin clicks, heavy rain, shipping, etc. And motion sickness occurs, with varieties of motion, because virtual reality can cause everything, and some people are much more sensitive, that has to do with the inner ear syndrome. Okay, and mood changes, basically due to motion, and again, the amplitude can, and especially a lot of people get this when they are on merry-go-round, and that has to do with your discrepancy between what your eye sees and your inner ear does, and how the people who do the ballet dancing, they can do their spinning around without getting dizzy, because by focusing on one particular point. Okay, so, but this is a really genuine illness and can be a really severe disabling system. So we'll talk about the balance part, which is an integral part of it.
Vestibular system. The vestibular system is a sensory system responsible for providing our brain with information about motion, head position, and spatial orientation. It is also involved with motor functions that allow us to keep our balance, stabilize our head and body during movement, and maintain posture. The main components of the vestibular system are found in the inner ear in a system of compartments called the vestibular labyrinth, which is continuous with the cochlea. The vestibular labyrinth contains the semicircular canals, which are 3 tubes that are each situated in a plane in which the head can rotate. Each of the canals can detect one of the following head movements: nodding up and down, shaking side to side, or tilting left and right. The semicircular canals are filled with a fluid called endolymph. When the head is rotated, it causes the movement of endolymph through the canal that corresponds to the plane of movement. The endolymph flows into an expansion of the canal called the ampulla, within which there are hair cells, the sensory receptors of the vestibular system. At the top of each hair cell is a collection of small hairs called stereocilia. The movement of the endolymph causes movement of these stereocilia, which leads to the release of neurotransmitters to send information about the plane of movement to the brain. The vestibular system uses two other organs, known as the otolith organs, to detect forward and backward movements and gravitational forces. There are two otolith organs in the vestibular labyrinth, the utricle, which detects movements in the horizontal plane, and the saccule, which detects movements in the vertical plane. Within the utricle and saccule, hair cells detect movement when crystals of calcium carbonate called otoconia shift in response to it, leading to movement in the layers below the otoconia and displacement of hair cells.
Okay, so this is, important because sometimes, this can be affected, the balance can be affected by doing roller coasters, and the brain has to correct this, and the muscles have to respond to it, this kind of a learned behavior thing. So, and again, there was a particular Native American tribe that worked on building the high-rise buildings, okay? And again, the eyes are extremely important because the vision helps correct with this. And I already give you the example of and this can be damaged by alcohol and cerebellar disease, and this, becomes a problem for space travel.
Vestibular.
Neuroplasticity.
And vision isn't the only sense which can be reorganized with the BrainPort equipment. Mitch Tyler had an illness which put a second device on the fast track.
Well, I had an inner ear infection. I woke up one morning and sat upright and fell over on the sofa, and the world was spinning. I thought to myself, this really stinks. If I could just have something that told me where up is and where I am in space, it would be great. So I wandered in here and proposed this idea to Paul, that what if we could present balance information?
Cheryl Schiltz also lost her sense of balance. An antibiotic had destroyed the filaments in her inner ears, which transform sound into nerve pulses. This wrecked her vestibular system, which controls balance.
I said, you mean there's nothing that can be done? What do you mean permanent? There's got to be like medicine or a surgery or something. I can't live like this for the rest of my life. Are you crazy?
Cheryl's life was so impaired that the thought that she would ever again work a regular job, much less ride a bike, seemed impossible. Tyler and Kazmarek built the balance device just like the vision device, but with one difference. Instead of a camera for sight, they used an accelerometer, a full-motion tilt sensor in a helmet to transmit head and body position to the tongue.
I was sitting in my backyard and I received a call from Dr. Baccarita. And he told me about the study that they were doing with sensory substitution. I'm thinking, all right, I'm going to put this thing on my tongue and it's going to make me feel in balance. Oh, sure. And I put the device on my tongue and asked to navigate a kind of like a video game thing on a computer.
Now the square in the middle represents the position of the head. It's in the neutral position. And then if we tip it forward, the sensation moves to the tip of the tongue.
So I will feel a signal moving forward or back or side to side, and what that is telling me, okay, I'm too far forward, I have to come back and put that signal back into the middle of my tongue. And that's where I know that that's where I am in balance, and I'm indeed standing straight up.
We saw that Cheryl can use it immediately and very effectively. And as a matter of fact, so effectively, so the next logical question was, let's remove it and see how long she can stay without it.
Her feeling of stability, what they called the retention or residual effect, lasted in direct proportion to how long she used the device.
It's so wonderful. From there on, we started just built on that, and to eventually getting to doing a 20-minute trial, and that's...
And vision isn't the only sense which can be reorganized with the BrainPort equipment.
Groundbreaking research. Okay, and again, Parkinson's patients respond to musical therapy basically, so they're otherwise they're shaking incessantly, but with music, they can be trained type of thing. Okay, the sound can be used as a weapon type of thing basically, and the Tacoma Bridge with the harmony, the frequency was identical, and it wasn't engineering wise, it wasn't corrected. The bridge shook and collapsed. So this was almost like a built-in in 1940s, and when the wind spin, the resonance of the structure caused a feedback, and the wind stress called vibrations and crash. Okay, and so this was again, the bombers had their the siren type of roaring sound that was associated. Okay, and so this has been, General Noriega, I already talked about how it was used as a weapon. Okay, and it causes almost your dizziness and feeling sick to your stomach. And this can be again the speakers, and this is it's an interesting.
Okay, we're all set. Let her rip.
And this was in a Big Bang Theory as to how the Newtonian fluids can migrate to speaker. Okay, there are future technologies, cochlear implant. The growing of the hair cells, has been done in mice, but now that's still again, and gene therapy has been available and tried on an experimental basis for people who have this rare disease called Usher syndrome, where their hair cells have, they're not able to form the balance problems and deafness along with time. So, and there are varieties of proteins that have been used for direct injection for hair loss, and so varieties of new technologies are being used for people who have congenital deafness. And this is the slide for the Tacoma Bridge.
Dawn of a fatal day, and the wind begins to speak with a roar that no man can fail to hear. In a 40-mile-an-hour gale, the center span weaves like a ribbon in a swinging twist that you wouldn't believe possible unless you could see it as you do now. There's an automobile caught on the heaving roadway. The 11,000-ton center span twists and strains the giant cables that support it. Cables of 6,300 wire strands, each 17 inches thick. Back out of the danger zone, all stricken spectators are driven to safety as the bridge gyrates like a nightmare high above the river, twisting, turning, curling. The lone motorist is forced to abandon the car. He has but a few minutes in which to save himself. Face to face with fate, his destiny hanging in the balance. Will he heed the last warning or perish with the doomed structure? But he saves himself by seconds. No structure of steel and concrete can stand such a strain. Steel girders buckle and giant cables snap like puny threads. There it goes!
Okay, and that is something called the anechoic chamber. This is, experiments have demonstrated that this is stochastic resonance. So basically, this is like no reflected sounds. It's about this most silent place in the world, basically. Okay, and that's done for research purposes, basically. So now sometimes that and there are claims that it can make us more creative, so to speak. So this has been used on a trial basis, and it's in the quietest place in the world, basically. Okay, all right. I don't think I have too much on this one.
This is
and pathophysiology of hearing, basically. So there are varieties of way hearing loss can be occurred, type of thing. First is the conductive, but the most common cause is the wax in the ear or otitis, or a hole in the due to infection in the tympanic membrane. The sensorineural loss can occur due to old age, noise, drugs, which we already talked about. And then the last one can be due to stroke, multiple sclerosis, a tumor, acoustic neuroma, and rare genetic causes that we talked about. One of the most common cause of hearing loss would be tinnitus, okay, or the ringing in the ear that takes place. And then that is the technology that, again, another example of neuroplasticity.
Severe hearing impairments could feel and learn to interpret as speech or any other audio.
The only thing I really care about is what's happening right now.
So we're working with the Eagleman Lab at the Baylor College of Medicine.
To the brain via other channels. So we're working on a project here in the Eagleman Laboratory with Scott Novich spearheading this for his thesis work, and the design team has designed. And when there's sound in the environment, a series of motors is vibrating, which means that he is feeling the sound information as vibrations on his back. And the key is that deaf people can come to understand the language of the vest. So by wearing this and practicing, and by having these patterns that represent different sounds, they can come to hear what's going on. They essentially can circumvent a broken auditory system.
The engineering challenge here is that you have sound, which is this very fast, one-dimensional time-varying signal, which is actually too fast for your skin to pick up on in its raw its raw sensory state. So the name of the game is, how can we use math to kind of beat the signal into shape such that the receptors in our skin are able to pick up on all of that needed information? So the basic trick we use is to use signal decompositions to essentially slow the signal down in exchange for increasing the dimensionality, which is why we have a grid of little tiny vibrational actuators on this thing. And that is sufficient for relaying enough information, in this case, for people to understand speech.
The lab at the Baylor College of Medicine have prototypes already that they're using for research, and they came to us and gave us these constraints, these engineering constraints that could allow this vest to go into the market for consumers to put on the vest and off the shelf and gain these abilities to perceive new forms of information. So part of the process of the CNE design has been to develop a business plan and
so this is, basically, so this is one way of doing, okay. And I think, when we already talked about receptors and we talked about touch, so there are varieties of channels that play part, but I think this is a repetition on this thing. So I think so far, so this gives you an insight of the pathophysiology and the vast variety along the evolutionary front on hearing. So I will stop here at this time and try to upload this. Let me stop my recording.